So you want to break into product management, you want to be able to get into that field that you are excited about, but it's not very easy to get that first position there. Let's talk about what it's an associate product manager. An associate product manager is typically the most entry-level position that there is for product management. Hence, this is probably the best way that you can actually start your product management career, because it's the one that is going to require probably less experience compared to trying to apply for being a product manager itself. But in this video, we are going to talk about what are the responsibilities, the role, and what are going to be the skills required to fulfill this position. And I also will talk a little bit about what are my thoughts on this role. Hey, my name is Juan Rodriguez. I'm a product director at a tech company in Finland. I have been working in tech companies for now about 20 years, and I would like to share my experiences and what I learned over these years with you. So first, let's talk about the definition of an associate product manager. And let's look at an example from Google. Google defines the responsibilities of an associate product manager as the person that leads efforts across engineering, design, marketing, and beyond to launch impactful projects. Grow personally and professionally through mentorship, global experience, and hands-on learning. So when it comes to the actual roles and responsibilities for an associate product manager, typically they are going to be focused more on the product execution part of product management. This means that an APM is typically going to focus more on tactical tasks compared to setting things like vision, strategy, long-term plans, and so on. And typically they are not going to take on the design, but probably this might depend on the company size, where maybe there's not a specific design team. But at least I have not seen companies that have APMs without having product design teams. But there might be something like that out there. So one of the first responsibilities that they are going to have is to plan features, to work with the rest of the engineering team, the product squad typically nowadays, and they are going to be able to break down that feature that they want to build into the different tasks or stories, epics, depends on how you build it in your company. Basically, they're going to do what many people call as backlog management as well. So not just the backlog planning, but also the management of that backlog, how to prioritize these tasks, how to prioritize them together with also the engineering team and see who the tasks are assigned, how the project is progressing, and so on. Many times, at least from my experience, the associate product manager is not going to be planning the full feature on their own. They're typically going to be working with somebody like a product manager, a CEO product manager that is going to help them setting maybe the main framework of that feature, whereas they are actually then taking that initial idea and then actually going more into a detailed plan of what this means in practice together with the rest of the product squad. Another task that they're going to have to do is managing stakeholders, because who doesn't have to do that nowadays? Nobody works in isolation. And this means that they're going to have to work with the rest of the product squad, meaning that they're going to work with potentially other product managers, they're going to work with product designers, they will work with engineers, with data scientists, and potentially other roles that are involved in the product squad. It depends on the situation of your company. It might be different how these product squads are set up. But this means that they are going to have to work with all these people to make sure that the progress of the development is there. So focusing on the outcome versus the output. Hopefully you know the difference there. And also making sure that everybody understands what the vision of this feature is. Why do we want to build this? Bringing that perspective from the users to the rest of the team, so they understand what a user feels, what a user needs are, and better understand what they're trying to build. And because they're going to act a little bit like this voice of the customer, they had to also pay a lot of attention into the feedback that comes from the customer, synthesizing that feedback, understanding what is the main outcome of the feedback that customers are giving. And at the same time, they had to also be able to understand the data that is coming from the product usage by those users. How can you interpret the users and the interactions that the users have with your product to make better decisions? So this means that they will go through potentially interviews outputs. Maybe not necessarily they are going to run the interviews. Many times this is going to be done by product designers. Again, will depend a lot on the setup in your company. Then try to extract those more like general concepts or the more commonalities that those interviews are giving, or surveys, whatever the format that you are running to get that feedback. And then also be able to ideally validate with the data that you get from the product. It's very important for them to be able to make that linkage, to understand the data and being able to link it to the customers' feedback. This is something that I don't see necessarily happening many times, and people tend to either just take the feedback from a customer as the absolute truth or the feedback from the data as the absolute truth. But there's no sometimes that kind of being able to overlap and being able to validate each other's data. And I don't mean that one or the other is more important. Of course, the most important thing is that you want to solve a customer problem, but that's not the information that you always get from a customer. So it's very important that, first of all, whoever's running the interviews knows how to run the interviews to understand and gather that actual initial problem, but also to be able to link and validate that information that you are getting from the customers with the data that you have available from the product. And yes, sometimes the data is going to be missing, and sometimes you don't have that data because it's a new feature. So what data do you have in your product? So in those cases, probably data is not going to be available to validate the requests or the comments or the points of view of a customer. So if you notice what I've been talking here, there are many of the responsibilities of an associate product manager that are very similar to those of a project manager. And I'm not going to say that it's the same thing. What they're building are not necessarily projects, but many times if you break a product and a feature to very, very, very small chunks, then you end up with something that is very similar to a project. I'm not going to go into the difference between a product and a project, but if you're interested, I have a video about it. I will link it in the description down below. But many of the responsibilities of an associate product manager are going to be similar to those of a project manager in the way that they are handling stakeholders, they had to manage the project, or manage the product, the feature development, work with other people, and so on. So there are quite many similarities. Well, you could argue that that's the same with a product manager, and probably that's one of the big confusions why people think that a product manager equals project manager, which we all know is not true. So now let's go a little bit through what are the different skills that you will need to be an associate product manager or an APM. So first of all, you are going to have to be able to manage the time pretty well. So time management is one of those things that is quite important for pretty much everybody nowadays, and it's something that most of us are not great at, and it's not something that is very maybe natural for humans to be doing, because otherwise we would do it really well. But understanding workloads, understanding effort, understanding how to distribute the work within the team, of course this is not something that they had to do on their own. Ideally, if the product squad is veteran enough, they're going to be able to handle it together, and then the estimates, the time management is going to be much better. But this is something that is going to be part of the role of an associate product manager. The next skill that they are going to have to master is communication. And communication is key for pretty much anybody, but especially when you are in product roles, it's very important that you are able to communicate what are your goals, what is your vision, what the problem that your customers have is. How are you trying to solve it? What is the long-term vision of your product? How you're going to get there? How you're going to build the features? And why a certain feature is important? Maybe not so important right now, but it's going to be very important in the future. Explaining and communicating all these things is going to be very important, and for good or for bad, repetition is also very important. So communicating all these ideas, all these goals, all your plans to the people in the team and potentially in the rest of the company is gonna be key for you to succeed in this role. And I talked earlier about managing the data from the interviews, and synthesize that information. So another skill that is going to be very important for an associate product manager is to be analytical. Understand data, understand the consequences of data, understand the relationships of data, understand when something causes an effect, understand the difference between vanity metrics and actionable metrics. All these things are going to help you a lot in your role, and are going to help you a lot being able to be this analytical person that has to be able to understand all the data, all the information flow that you will be getting non-stop into your desk. And because we are talking about tech companies, and because we all are agile, aren't we? Taking ownership of your role, taking ownership of your position, taking ownership of your responsibilities is gonna be really key for you to succeed. You cannot wait for somebody to come and do the work for you. You are an associate product manager. You have to be the one that takes responsibility, that drives that feature, that drives that development together with the rest of the product squad, but you had to be one of the first ones to show ownership of the work that you're doing. Otherwise, your work and otherwise the features are never going to go where you think that they should be. So what are my thoughts about associate product managers? So the first of all that comes to my mind when I think about associate product managers, and one of the probably more common confusions that see that companies are going to have is that they're going to confuse this role by that one of a product owner. So your typical PO, but please, I'm not trying to down talk POs, because I think the POs have a position and a role and they can be great at doing what they're doing. But many companies out there are going to think the position and the role of a PO to be very similar to that one of a project manager, somebody who is just there to handle features, gets the information and everything chewed by somebody like a product manager or somebody else, but they actually have little to no ownership of the product. And I think that that's not correct. I think that an associate product manager is an entry-level position for a product manager. They have to be given the tools and the ability to make that kind of decisions, to take the ownership of the product and learn how to grow in their career. So what they cannot be is that they are just used as somebody that you can just dump things on and hope for the best and hope that they're going to deliver. But the reality is that there is not going to be much learning and much growth within the role if it's expected in that way. Another thought that I have is that associate product managers are great, but there's something to be considered when you're planning your company, and this is something that maybe companies don't pay too much attention to, is that you really need to make sure that if you want to have associate product managers, you have enough seniority within your product team to take care of them, to help them, to mentor them, and to help them grow in their career. If you don't have enough seniority within your team, those associate product managers are going to be left to their own devices. Some of them are going to be extremely successful and some of them won't. And this is something that is the reality of what happens in this world. But basically, even those ones that are going to be successful, they will have to learn everything on their own. And it's always much better when you can get help from others to help you grow, to mentor, and to help you learn how to be better at product management. So I would not recommend any company to take associate product managers if they don't have enough senior product managers within their team. And I don't mean necessarily senior by a title, but at least enough seniority on those product managers that can help others grow into their roles. An associate product manager is probably the best position or the best way of entering and breaking into product management. It typically will require less skills or less knowledge and experience that you will ask for a product manager position, and it's going to be a more tactical position, which means that it's going to be easier to find somebody that fulfills those criteria. So actually your best chances to land some kind of a role within product management is to go for those associate product managers roles. If done right, this is going to help you a lot to learn the principles of product management and actually get the practice with those principles and be able to implement them into concrete ways within the company that you will be working. So I'm thinking about you. Why are you watching this video? And probably you are looking at this video because you want to be an associate product manager, because being an associate product manager is that stepping stone for you to be a product manager, because probably that is your end goal. And now probably you are thinking, okay, but how do I get from an associate product manager to a product manager? And there is no clear path, as always. I think that the most important thing that you have to concentrate on when you are trying to do that career move is that, well, first of all, you probably shouldn't be thinking too much about a career move. Probably then you are doing it for the wrong reasons. You are there for one reason. You want to be a product manager for one reason, not just because you want to manage products. It's because you want to solve the problems of your users. At the same time, you want to create the highest impact in your business or the company. The best way that you can actually progress in your career is focusing on one area. Try not to focus in too many areas. When you focus in too many areas, you're typically going to fail because you are going to dilute your efforts. Focus on one area and try to really nail it down, so your efforts are going to show to the rest of the company and people are going to notice that you are actually making a really good job at this work of being an associate product manager. So for example, tackle the problem of the user, better understand what the users are trying to do, better understand what is the point of view always of the user, be that voice of the user within the company, but be that person that really understands and is always communicating to the rest of the team and the rest of the company what that problem that the users have is, and you are able to explain it to them, and you are able to take that position from the point of view of a user. And you can do this with other parts. You can do this more with vision, strategy. You can do it more with execution. You can do it more by being brilliant at actually planning the job with the rest of the product squad. But you have to choose one area. What is the area that you really like and really focus and nail it down? That's the way that you are going to shine in your work. That's the way that people are going to recognize you, that your mentors, that your managers, they're more willing to help you grow in your career and actually go and land that product manager position that you are dreaming of. So earlier I talked about the companies sometimes confusing the associate product manager with a product owner position. If you want to learn more about the difference between a product owner and a product manager and what are the roles and responsibilities, go check out this video. If you like this video, if you found it valuable, I would appreciate a lot if you give it a like and subscribe to the channel. I will see you in the next video, and remember, stay safe.